Good fight card to get into. Interesting, I think, with the finale itself. We'll get to that in a second, but the card is loaded with some interesting fights. I think the Leonard Garcia-Nam Fan fight right off the bat is a good one.
Yeah, that's a very interesting fight. I like Garcia in that fight. Haven't seen a heck of a lot of Nam Fan, but I think Leonard Garcia, wins that fight. But to me, that's one of those ones that's going to tell a lot about how good Nam Fan's going to be, because Leonard Garcia comes to fight. He's a handful for all but the really elite guys, and so if he can if Nam Fan can handle Leonard Garcia, then I think that they've developed a good fighter on the show.
Big test in the next fight for both guys. Johnny Hendricks, I think quietly, has rolled to an unbeaten record. He's been very effective as he's adding to his game. And on the other side, Rick Story is a rough, tough customer.
Yeah, that's another interesting fight. I've liked Johnny Hendricks a lot. He's really, I think, improved his game dramatically in the last year or so. I'm going to pick Hendricks in this fight. I only picked that because of his wrestling background, though, because I really like Rick Story a lot. I've seen Rick fight quite a few times. I know he's tremendously strong, but I just think Hendricks is going to find a way to pull that one out.
All right, Damian Maia is going up against Kendall Grove. Yeah, Kendall Grove is still around, survivor. It seems like every fight he's on the verge of being out of the organization, but he's an action fighter. He's really resilient. He's going against a tough matchup here. Obviously, the story most fights with Grove is if it's going to go to the ground, if he's going to get in trouble on the ground, and obviously you don't want to go down there with Maia.
To me, this is the toughest fight to call on the card. When I look at all the fights on this card, Steve, this is the hardest one. I can make a case for both guys. I'm going to go with Grove in the fight. I just think that his stand-up is at a different level, and I think he seems to me to fight hungrier than Damian Maia does. I'm going to figure that Kendall Grove is going to find a way to keep the fight on his feet, and if he can do that, I think he wins. So I'm going to go with Kendall Grove by some kind of stoppage.
Top two fights on the card, obviously dotted by a main event with Stephan Bonnar. We'll get to that in a second, but the finale of the reality show. What have you thought in general of the reality show? Do you think this is one of those seasons where there are 3 or 4 legit prospects? Or are we seeing the only 2 guys, maybe along with Nam Fan, who are going to emerge as roster guys a year from now in UFC?
I really do like both Brookins and Johnson. The one thing about Johnson that I kind of, he talked all throughout the series about his hands, but to me it was his wrestling. I didn't really see these great hands like that, I'm going to be fearful of this guy as a striker. Steve, I thought that, he showed pretty good wrestling and, pretty good cardio in the fights. I think he's a definite prospect. It's going to be interesting to see how he does against Brookins. He's worked with Greg Jackson since the show ended, so I think that's going to be fascinating to see. Brookins, I think, is really a top drawer prospect, although I think maybe at 145. I put in my column I wrote on Brookins, I said, if you can go into the third round with Jose Aldo, you convince me that you're a good fighter. And he did that, late 2008, so about 2 years ago. I think Jonathan Brookins is a legit fan. I think he can be a prospect too. I think he has a little bit more to prove, and we'll learn, as I said earlier, we'll learn a little bit in the Leonard Garcia fight. But I've liked this season. It hasn't been the over-the-top season that we've seen on some of the years, but I thought that this season's been good because I thought there's been a pretty good focus on fighting and training. And Steve, I really think Alex Caceres is also a pretty good prospect. A raw guy, but I think, he has some tools, and, he's going to need good coaching, and he's going to really need to commit to being the best fighter that he can be, as opposed to being a decent fighter and a comedian. But if he commits to being the kind of fighter that his talent suggests, I think he could be another one. So there could be 4 guys that come out of this and that, become UFC regulars. That's not bad when you're coming off a reality season.
We are entering a new era, though, with the Ultimate Fighter because of the addition of the 145 and 35 pounders from WEC and some of that lightweight roster. It's going to be really tough to come right out and get in. It might be kind of the training ground to get attention, go make some money with smaller promotions, get fights, go on a win streak, and come back later. But they're not going to invite 7 guys from every season.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, you think of the early seasons and guys, they got to the fight on the finale, and if they put on a good fight in the finale, it seemed like they were guaranteed a contract just as well as the guys in the finals. I think you're right. I mean, especially, you look at Brookins, is kind of a smaller guy, looking to probably move to 145 again anyways. There's going to be a lot of competition for those lightweight spots in particular, given the crossover between the WEC and the UFC. That's going to really bear a lot of watching. But, I think that anybody who wins the Ultimate Fighter makes it to the finals, they're going to be around a while just by benefit of the marketing and everything that the UFC's invested in them and the visibility that those guys have had, Steve.
So back to Brookins and Johnson, your official pick is going to be Brookins?
I like Brookins by decision. I don't see either guy finishing the other. I think Brookins seems to me to be a little bit more technically sound. I could see Brookins getting a submission in this fight, but I just think that Michael Johnson knows his game very well. They were training partners very much on the show. So I'm going to pick Jonathan Brookins. I know it's kind of a boring pick because he's, a 2-1 favorite? But, I'm going to go with Brookins by decision here.
You like having Stephan Bonnar as the main event fight? I mean, it's not one of those fights that kind of leads to anything, but it should be an action fight against Pokrajac.
Yeah, Steve, I know a lot of people thought it was a little bit over the top when I suggested Bonnar make the UFC Hall of Fame, and it wasn't strictly for his ability as a fighter. It's for the fact that, hey, he had that great fight with Forrest Griffin. He comes and he brings it every single time, and I think this is going to be one of those fights. Pokrajac is a guy that comes to fight. He's a guy that, likes to throw hands, and certainly that's what Stephan Bonnar does. And, anytime Stephan Bonnar's fighting, you're going to see the big-time effort out of him. To me, I think this fight, and I think on these Ultimate Fight Night cards and Ultimate Fighter finale cards, those are the kind of fights that you want. You just want good fights. They don't necessarily have to lead to something down the road. Just, get people into the fight game. If you put on a show that, when the card's over, people are going to say, hey, I saw a good show, I want to see the next one, then it did its job. And I think, anytime you have Stephan Bonnar on a card, you have a good chance of getting that kind of fight.
Agreed. I think hardcores misread what these free shows on Spike are all about, and it's not necessarily about bigger name fighters advancing in a hunt for a title. It's about bringing in the casual fan. They don't care who's fighting. They don't know the guys anyway, a lot of them.
Yeah, I agree, and and this is one that when you talk about Bonnar, I mean, Bonnar is one of the guys that there's no rolling the dice with. You have some guys that, hey, they go out there and they're tentative. They talk the talk, but then they can't walk the walk. Bonnar's going to go. If Bonnar gets drilled, he gets drilled. That's how he is. He's not afraid. He comes out. He brings it every time. He pushes the pace. He makes his opponent fight. He's fought a lot of good guys and he's lost a lot of those battles. But the one thing that's been consistent with him is he's given you a high effort level and a high activity level, and that's what people tune in to see. That's what's made MMA such a popular sport, is the guys really who bring it, and Stephan Bonnar is definitely one of those. All
right, Kev, nice job. Check for Kevin Iole's coverage tomorrow night from the Palms at the Pearl. Full card recap from Yahoo.
Definitely be there, and I always like going to the Palms, Steve, because we got Nathan's Hot Dogs. Is there anybody out there with Nathan's Hot Dogs listening to this?
Let's cut a check, please. All right, see you, Kev.
See you, man. Thanks.